On the far edge of known space, where stars grew thin and silence stretched for light years, a small Krellian patrol ship drifted through the cold. Its name was Zintra 7, and it belonged to the Outer Rim Watch, a quiet branch of the Krellian defense fleet tasked with monitoring debris fields and abandoned vessels. The crew was small. 5 Krellians scaled in dull gray with eyes like polished obsidian and voices that clicked more than they spoke. Their commander, Vexilor, stood at the forward viewport, his long fingers resting on the cool metal rail. He had served 30 cycles without firing a single shot. He liked it that way. The alert came without fanfare, a soft chime in the command chamber. One of the junior officers, Krellin, pointed a clawed hand toward the main display. A faint signal pulsed in the distance, weak but steady. It wasn't Krellian. It wasn't Vorn. It wasn't any known code in their database. Curious, Vexler ordered a course adjustment. The Zintra 7 turned slowly, its ion thrusters humming as it closed the gap. What they found was a battered escape pod, tumbling end over end near the wreckage of a freighter that had been torn apart by something violent, maybe pirates, maybe a gravity shear. The pod's hull was scorched, its solar panels shattered and its oxygen reserves nearly gone. But inside, life signs flickered, faint, human. Vexler hesitated. Humans were new to the galactic scene. Their world, Earth, had only recently cracked the light barrier, sending out cautious probes and slow colony ships. They weren't part of any alliance. They hadn't signed the Concord of Neutrals. To most older species, humans were loud, emotional, and unpredictable. The Krellians had observed them from afar but never made contact. Protocol said to log the find, tag the coordinates, and move on. Non-interference was sacred. But Vexler had been raised on the old stories, tales of stranded travelers saved by strangers, of debts repaid across generations. He looked at the pod again. One life, alone, dying in the void. That wasn't just data, that was a being. "Bring it aboard," he said. The crew exchanged glances. Krellin opened his mouth to object, but stopped. Vexler's word was law. With careful precision, the Zintra 7 extended its magnetic grapple and drew the pod into the lower bay. Atmosphere sealed. Decontamination cycle initiated. Then the hatch hissed open. Inside lay a man, young, maybe 30 cycles by human reckoning. His face was pale, lips cracked, eyes closed. His flight suit, once bright orange, was stained with soot and dried blood. Strapped to his chest was a small survival pack. Sewn into the collar and faded thread were 2 words: Ethan Cole. Medics rushed in. They didn't know human physiology well, but basic life support was universal. They injected him with a mild stimulant, placed an oxygen mask over his face, and monitored his vitals on a borrowed bioscanner borrowed from a trade post years ago. Slowly, his breathing steadied. His pulse, once fluttering like a trapped bird, grew stronger. While he slept, the crew examined his pod. No weapons, no military insignia, just a civilian surveyor's badge and a log tablet. The last entry read, "Freighter Horizon lost power near Andromeda Fringe. Hull breach in Sector 4. Launching pod. Mayday sent on all bands. If anyone hears this, tell my sister I tried." Vexler read the words twice. He didn't understand sister, but he understood loss. He understood trying. Back on Earth, thousands of light years away, a different kind of silence fell over Houston Command. The Outer Rim Initiative had lost contact with Surveyor Ethan Cole 3 days ago. His last known position was near the Andromeda Expanse, a lawless stretch of space where signals often vanished. At first they assumed comms failure. Then when his emergency beacon stopped broadcasting, worry turned to dread. But then something strange happened. A foreign signal, clean, structured, not random noise, began echoing from the same coordinates. It wasn't human. It carried biometric data that matched Ethan's profile: heart rate, body temperature, even brainwave patterns. Someone had him. Someone was keeping him alive. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Tran stared at the screen in disbelief. "They're monitoring him," she whispered. "Like a specimen." Her superior, Admiral Rick Dawson, frowned. "Or a prisoner. No one knew who they were." Scans showed a small vessel, non-human design, unknown origin. It wasn't responding to hails. Not in standard, not in trade tongue. Not even in the old Krellian dialects Earth's linguists had begun studying after first contact rumors surfaced years ago. Panic spread quietly through the command center. Earth had been on edge since the Vorn hegemony started testing borders near Mars' colony. Any unknown ship near a human asset was treated as a threat. Protocols kicked in. Alerts flashed red. Within hours, the Strategic Defense Network activated Terra Shield, a contingency plan designed for exactly this, the capture of a human by an unknown power. Lisa tried to argue. The data shows he's stable. They're giving him oxygen, fluids. They're helping him. Or keeping him alive for interrogation, Dawson countered. We don't know their motives. Meanwhile, aboard the Zintra 7, Ethan stirred. His eyes opened, blue, confused, full of pain. He saw strange faces above him, tall, scaled, with no visible ears and too many teeth. He tried to speak, but his throat was raw. One of the Krellians handed him a cup of water, filtered, warm, safe. Ethan drank greedily. Through gestures and broken attempts at shared symbols, he managed to point to his chest, then to the name on his suit. Ethan, he rasped. Vexler repeated it slowly. A-ton, Ethan nodded. Then he pointed to the Krellian, questioning. Vexler, the commander said. A moment of quiet passed. No weapons drawn, no threats. Just two beings from opposite ends of creation, meeting in the dark. Vexler believed he had done the right thing. He had saved a life. Honor demanded it. What he didn't know was that across the void, Earth had already begun to mobilize. Ships were powering up. Generals were briefing presidents. And a single act of kindness, pure, simple, human, was about to ignite a war neither side wanted. Ethan, still weak, looked out the viewport at the stars. He thought of home. He thought of his sister. He had no idea that his rescue had just changed everything. Back on Earth, the news moved faster than light. Not the truth, but the fear. Within hours of detecting the alien signal carrying Ethan Cole's biometrics, Houston Command escalated the alert to the highest level. President Alan Briggs was woken at 3 a.m. by a secure call from Admiral Rick Dawson. The message was short. A human is in alien hands. We don't know who they are. We don't know what they want. Briggs sat up in bed, rubbing his eyes. He had campaigned on peace, on rebuilding after the Mars food riots, on keeping Earth out of deep space conflicts. Now his first real test wasn't about policy or budgets, it was about one man, floating somewhere in the black, possibly being studied like a lab rat. Public channels hadn't been told yet, but rumors leaked. A junior tech at Houston Command mentioned the signal to a friend, who told a blogger who posted a vague but alarming thread. Human surveyor missing. Alien ship spotted. No response. Within minutes it went viral. News networks picked it up. Talking heads debated whether this was first contact or first capture. Conspiracy forums exploded. Mothers hugged their children tighter. Soldiers checked their gear. Lisa Tran tried to calm the storm from inside. She pulled every favor she had to get access to the raw data stream from the alien vessel. What she saw didn't look like captivity. The biometrics were stable. The oxygen levels were optimal. There were even signs of medical care. Fluids administered, fever reduced. But no one wanted to hear nuance. Not when fear was louder. At the Pentagon, war rooms lit up. The Third Fleet, Earth's newest and fastest strike force, was put on standby. Its flagship, the UNS Resolute, carried enough firepower to level a small moon. Admiral Dawson argued for immediate deployment. If they're holding him, we show strength. If they're hurting him, we respond. If they're just watching, we make sure they never try again. Briggs hesitated. What if they saved him? Dawson scoffed. Then why won't they talk to us? Why hide in the dark? The truth was, the Krellians weren't hiding. They simply didn't know Earth could hear them. Their ship's systems broadcasted basic life readings as part of standard rescue protocol, a way to prove to any passing authority that they acted in good faith. But Earth had no such system. To human eyes, it looked like surveillance. Meanwhile, aboard the Zintra 7, Ethan was getting stronger. He could sit up now. He ate a soft paste the Krellians offered, nutrient-rich, bland, but safe. He watched them work, studied their movements. They were careful around him, almost reverent. When he pointed to a star chart on the wall, Vexler brought it closer. Ethan traced a line with his finger, Earth's location. Vexler nodded slowly. He understood distance. He understood home. Using a shared tablet, Ethan drew symbols. A circle for Earth, a stick figure for himself, a question mark. Vexler responded with a Krellian glyph for safe and another for wait. They were trying. It was slow, clumsy, but honest. Vexler knew Earth would come looking. He'd read the human distress call embedded in the pod's memory. He prepared a message. A formal declaration of goodwill in Krellian diplomatic code, translated as best as their system could manage into standard English. It said, "We found your traveler alone and dying. We gave him shelter. We mean no harm. We await your word," he sent it on an open channel repeated every 6 minutes, hoping someone would understand. But Earth's military filters flagged the transmission as encrypted. The repeated signal looked like a data burst, maybe a countdown, maybe a trap. The message was routed to cyber defense, not diplomacy. No one read the words. They only saw the pattern. In Chicago, a quiet linguist named Marcus Bell was having coffee when his old university friend Lisa called. "I need your help," she said. "There's a signal. It might be language, not code." Marcus, who had spent years studying Dead Earth languages and now dabbled in alien syntax models, agreed to come in. He arrived at Houston Command in a wrinkled shirt, carrying a thermos and a battered notebook. Within an hour, he was staring at the Krellian message. "This isn't a threat," he said, eyes wide. "It's a letter." But by then it was too late. The Third Fleet had already launched. 6 destroyers, 2 carriers, and the Resolute, over 10,000 personnel, were en route to the Andromeda Fringe. Their orders: retrieve Ethan Cole by any means necessary. Back on the Zintra 7, Ethan finally managed to speak clearly. "Thank you," he said, looking at Vexler. "You saved me." Vexler tilted his head. He didn't understand the words, but he heard the tone. Gratitude. He placed a 3-fingered hand over his chest, then pointed to Ethan. A Krellian gesture meaning, "Your life is seen." Ethan smiled weakly. He didn't know that his rescue had become a casus belli. He didn't know that Earth's leaders were convinced he was being held against his will. He only knew that these strangers had pulled him from death and treated him like a guest. On Earth, protests began. Not all were for war. Some held signs that read, "Don't shoot the rescuers," or "Talk first." But they were drowned out by louder voices demanding action. Social media flooded with edited videos showing alien ships looming over cities. Fake but convincing. Fear sold better than hope. President Briggs met with his council one last time before the fleet crossed the threshold. "If we're wrong," he said quietly, "we start a war over a misunderstanding." Dawson stood firm. "If we're right, we save a human life and show the galaxy we won't be pushed around." Briggs signed the order. Light years away, the Zintra 7 received a new signal. Not a message, but a massive energy spike. Sensors lit up. Multiple large vessels approaching at high speed. Weapons hot. Transponders broadcasting human military codes. Vexler's blood ran cold. He turned to Ethan. "Your people come." Ethan's face lit up. "They're here for me?" Vexler didn't answer. He saw the weapon signatures. He knew what this meant. Honor had brought him here. Now honor might get them all killed. He ordered the crew to prepare for contact, but also for defense. Shields up. Engines ready. No aggression, but no surrender. Ethan, still weak but hopeful, stood by the viewport. He waved at the incoming ships as if they could see him. He thought they were coming to thank the Krellians. He had no idea they came to fight them. The Third Fleet formed a tight perimeter around the Zintra 7. Hails blared across every channel. "Release the human." "Stand down." "You are in violation of Earth's sovereign rights." Vexler tried to respond with his goodwill message again, but the human ships didn't listen. They only saw an alien vessel holding a human. That was enough. Ethan heard the hails. His smile faded. "No," he whispered. "You don't understand." But his voice was too small against the roar of warships. The rescue was over. The reckoning had begun. The Third Fleet hung in space like a wall of steel and fire. 6 destroyers formed a half-circle around the small Krellian ship, their weapon ports glowing faintly red. The UNS Resolute, massive and dark, loomed behind them like a storm cloud. Every ship broadcast the same demand on every open frequency. "Release the human. Power down your systems. Prepare for boarding." Inside the Zintra 7, alarms blinked softly, not in panic but in warning. Vexler stood rigid at the command console, his scales tight against his skull. He had sent the message again and again. He had shown Ethan on the screen, alive, walking, unharmed. But the humans did not respond with words. They responded with guns. Ethan watched from the observation bay, his hands pressed against the cool glass. He recognized the Earth Fleet insignia on the lead destroyer. He knew those ships. He had trained on simulators just like them back at the Outer Rim Academy. These were his people, his protectors, but now they looked like invaders. "Tell them I'm okay," he said, voice rough but clear. "Tell them you saved me." Vexler nodded slowly. He activated the external comms one last time. "We return your traveler now," he said in halting standard, using the translation module Marcus Bell would later call miraculously close. "He is well. We mean peace." Then he gave the order. A small shuttle detached from the Zintra 7's belly, smooth and silent. Inside sat Ethan, wrapped in a thermal blanket holding a data chip with the full medical log and Vexlor's message. 2 Krellian escort frigates, barely larger than fighters, moved with it, not as guards but as witnesses. In Krellian custom, returning a guest required honor guards. It was a sign of respect, but to Lieutenant Jake Morrow, a young pilot on the destroyer USS Carson, it looked like a trap. He had been told the alien ship might try to flee or fight. He saw 2 unknown vessels flanking a human shuttle. His fingers hovered over the weapons console. "Carson to Resolute," he radioed, voice tight. "Shuttle launching with 2 escorts. Possible hostile intent." Admiral Dawson's voice came back cold and sharp. "Hold fire, but be ready." Ethan's shuttle moved slowly toward the human line. He waved again, this time with both hands. He wanted them to see him, to know he wasn't a prisoner, but space is vast and fear is louder than waves. A sensor glitch, later blamed on solar interference, made one of the Krellian frigates appear to accelerate suddenly. It didn't, but the Carson's AI flagged it as a threat. Jake Morrow, heart-pounding, fired a single warning shot. A low-yield plasma burst meant to flash near the frigate's bow. It missed its mark. The bolt struck the frigate's forward shield. The shield held, but the impact sent a shockwave through the small ship. Lights flickered. Alarms screamed in Krellian tones. On the Zintra 7, Vexlor's eyes narrowed. In Krellian law, any strike on a vessel under truce was an act of war. There were no warnings, no second chances. Honor demanded response. "Raise shields," he said. "Arm defensive turrets. Do not fire unless fired upon again." But the damage was done. On the Resolute, Dawson saw the Krellian ship power up. "They're charging weapons," he barked. "All ships, lock targets." "No," Lisa Tran shouted from the comm station. "Wait, that shot came from us. They're reacting." But her voice was lost in the roar of battle prep. Orders had already been given. The Krellian frigate that had been hit rotated slowly. Its captain, loyal to Vexler, did not fire. But the second frigate, its pilot young and shaken, misread the command. Thinking they were under attack, he launched a countermeasure, a sonic pulse designed to disable engines, not destroy hulls. To human sensors, it looked like a weapon. The Carson returned fire, this time with real intent. The plasma beam tore through the Krellian frigate's wing. Metal vaporized. Atmosphere hissed into space. The ship spun wildly, then went dark. Ethan screamed inside the shuttle. He saw it happen. He saw his rescuers die because of a mistake. "Stop!" he yelled into the comm. "Stop fighting. They helped me. They saved my life." His voice crackled across the open channel, but it was drowned out by tactical alerts, by orders, by the thunder of engines and weapons charging. Vexler, watching the frigate fall, made his choice. He could retreat, save his crew, but to flee now would brand his people as cowards and leave Ethan in the hands of those who fired first. So he did the only thing his code allowed. He stood his ground. The Zintra 7 shields flared blue. Its hidden turrets unfolded from the hull, not to attack but to defend. The human fleet interpreted it as aggression. Missiles launched. Railguns fired. The void lit up with streaks of light and fire. Ethan's shuttle was caught in the crossfire. Warning lights flashed red. The pilot, a Krellian named Trell, swerved hard, diving toward the Resolute's underbelly for cover. Ethan was thrown against his restraints. He fumbled for the emergency comm. He bypassed military channels. Used an old civilian frequency, wide open, unfiltered. "This is Ethan Cole," he gasped, blood trickling from his temple. "I was in an escape pod, dying. The Krellians found me. They gave me water. They kept me warm. They didn't ask for anything. They're not the enemy. You are shooting the wrong people." His voice, raw and trembling, blasted across every public and military band. For 3 seconds, the entire fleet heard him. On the Carson, Jake Morrow froze. On the Resolute, Lisa Tran held her breath. Even Admiral Dawson paused, his finger hovering over the fleet-wide fire command. But war has its own momentum. A Krellian point defense laser lanced out, not at a ship, but at a missile heading for the Zintra 7. The explosion blinded a human sensor array. The Carson, thinking it was under direct fire, unleashed a full salvo. Vexillor had no choice now. He returned fire, not to kill, but to disable. His shot struck engine nacelles, not bridges. He aimed for systems, not souls. But in battle, there is no such thing as a clean shot. One human destroyer lost power. Another spun out of formation. The Resolute took a glancing hit to its shield generator. Alarms wailed across the fleet. Ethan's shuttle finally docked with the Resolute. He was pulled inside by medics, still shouting, still begging them to stop. They sedated him gently, thinking he was in shock. He was. But not from injury, from grief. Back on Earth, the first news of the battle reached the public. Human fleet engages alien vessel near Andromeda Fringe, the headlines read. One human confirmed alive. But then Ethan's transmission leaked. Raw. Unedited. Heartbreaking. I was saved, he said again in the recording. Why are you doing this? The clip spread faster than any official report. People listened. They heard the pain. They heard the truth. In Houston Command, Marcus Bell played the Krellian message side by side with Ethan's words. The match was perfect. The aliens hadn't captured him. They had cared for him. Lisa Tran took the evidence straight to President Briggs. We started this, she said. Not them. Briggs stared at the screen, his face gray. He thought of the soldiers lost. The alien lives ended all because no one waited to understand. But the battle wasn't over yet. Out in the black, ships still fired. Orders still flew. And Ethan, unconscious in a medical bay, dreamed of a quiet pod and a gray-scaled hand offering water. He had been rescued once. Now someone had to rescue the peace. The truth did not arrive with fanfare. It slipped through the cracks of war like a whisper in a storm. Ethan's raw transmission, his voice cracking, his words simple and desperate, spread across Earth faster than any military alert. People heard it in homes, in cafes, in subway cars. They heard a man who had been saved, not stolen. They heard gratitude, not fear. And for the first time since the fleet launched, doubt crept into the public mind. Lisa Tran and Marcus Bell worked through the night in a dim corner of Houston Command, ignored by the generals but trusted by a few key techs. Marcus had matched the Krellian goodwill message to known diplomatic patterns from old galactic archives. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea for understanding. Lisa pulled the full sensor logs from the Carson, the ship that fired first. Frame by frame, she showed how a minor glitch, a moment of panic, had sparked everything. The Krellian frigate never accelerated. The weapon was a non-lethal countermeasure. The Zintra 7 only fired after taking hits. They compiled it all, audio, data, translations, and sent it not through official channels, but to every independent news outlet they could reach. Within hours, the story flipped. Earth attacked rescuers, read one headline. One shot started a war, said another. Protests erupted outside military bases. Families of soldiers held signs that read, "Bring them home, not more bodies." Even some officers in the fleet began to question their orders. Aboard the Resolute, Ethan woke in a medical bay with soft lights and quiet machines. His head ached, but his mind was clear. He asked for a comlink. They refused at first, but when he said, "I need to talk to Vexillor," and explained who that was, a young nurse named Carla Diaz helped him. She believed him. She'd heard his transmission too. Ethan reached the Zintra 7 on a low-power band. Vexillor answered personally. His voice was tired but steady. "They know now," Ethan said. "Earth knows you saved me." Vexillor was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Your people shoot first. Talk later." "I'm sorry," Ethan whispered. "I'll fix this." Back on Earth, President Briggs faced the hardest decision of his life. The fleet was still engaged. 2 human ships were crippled. 1 Krellian frigate was gone. The Zintra 7 was holding position, shields flickering but not retreating, not attacking, waiting. Briggs called Admiral Dawson into the Oval Office. No aides, no recorders, just 2 men who had trusted each other for 20 years. "We were wrong," Briggs said. Dawson's jaw tightened. "We acted on what we knew." "We didn't listen," Briggs replied. "And now good people are dead." He gave the order, full ceasefire. Recall all offensive systems. Open a direct diplomatic channel to the Krellian vessel. And release Ethan's full statement to the world, unedited, unspun. The message went out minutes later. Across the fleet, weapons powered down. Pilots exhaled. On the Carson, Jake Morrow removed his helmet and cried. Vexler received the ceasefire signal. He did not trust it at first, but when the human ships began to pull back, forming a wide perimeter instead of a firing line, he lowered his shield slightly. Not all the way, but enough. Ethan, now dressed in a clean uniform, stood before Admiral Dawson on the Resolute's bridge. "Let me go to them," he said. "Let me stand with Vexilor. Show them we're not enemies." Dawson looked at him for a long time. Then he nodded. "You've earned that right." A small diplomatic shuttle, unarmed, marked with Earth's peace sigil, carried Ethan back to the Zintra 7. This time, no escorts. No weapons. Just one man and a message. Vexilor met him at the airlock. No words were needed. They clasped forearms in the human way Ethan had shown him days before. Then Vexilor placed his other hand over his own heart, a Krellian sign of deep trust. Inside, Ethan spoke plainly to the crew. "My people made a mistake, a bad one, but they're trying to fix it. They want to talk, not fight." Krellin, the junior officer who had doubted the rescue at first, looked at Ethan with new eyes. He handed him a cup of warm nutrient tea, the same kind he'd been given when weak. It was an apology. Meanwhile, on Earth, Lisa and Marcus prepared for the next step. They knew a ceasefire wasn't peace. They needed proof that could convince not just leaders but the whole world. Marcus found something in the Krellian message they'd missed, a cultural note. In Krellian tradition, saving a life created a bond called jartel, a debt of honor that could only be repaid with protection or truth. By rescuing Ethan, Vexler had tied his fate to Earth's. He hadn't wanted thanks. He'd accepted responsibility. Lisa sent this to President Briggs. He read it twice. Then he made a speech, not from the White House, but from Houston Command, standing beside Lisa and Marcus. "We thought we were defending one of our own," he said, voice heavy. "But we almost destroyed something rare, a hand offered in kindness across the stars. Today we choose to believe in that kindness. We choose to listen." The speech aired live. Even the Vorn hegemony paused their border drills to watch. Aboard the Zintra 7, Ethan sat with Vexilor, looking at star maps. "What happens now?" Ethan asked. Vexilor pointed to Earth's symbol, then to his own ship. Then he drew a line between them, not of war but of meeting. Ethan understood. "We talk," he said. "Yes," Vexilor replied. "We talk." And for the first time since the pod was found, both sides truly meant it. The meeting place was neutral by design, a small orbital station orbiting Proxima Centauri, far from Earth, far from Krellian space. It had been built years ago for scientific exchange, but never used. Now it hummed with life. Human engineers and Krellian technicians worked side by side to prepare the main chamber, adjusting gravity fields, calibrating air mixtures, and testing translation systems. Both sides were nervous. Both wanted this to work. Ethan Cole stood at the station's observation deck, watching two fleets hold position in the distance. The human Third Fleet, still bearing the scars of battle, floated in neat formation. The Krellian conclave ships, sleek, organic-looking vessels with glowing veins of blue light, mirrored them on the opposite side. No weapons charged, no shields raised, just silence and the slow dance of giants learning to trust. He wore a simple gray suit, no rank, no insignia. Just a human being. Beside him stood Lisa Tran and Marcus Bell. Behind them, a small honor guard of Krellians led by Vexler waited patiently. The Krellian commander had refused to enter the chamber until Ethan was ready. "This piece is yours," he had said. "You earned it by speaking truth when others chose fear." Inside the chamber, President Alan Briggs sat at a long table made of reclaimed asteroid metal. Across from him sat Elder Marath, the oldest living member of the Krellian High Conclave. Her scales were silver with age, her eyes deep with centuries of judgment. She had not spoken since arriving. She only watched. The talks began slowly. At first, both sides listed losses. Human ships damaged, Krellian lives lost. Words like regret and mistake were used often. But then Marcus Bell stood and played the full sequence. Ethan's distress call, the Krellian rescue logs, the misread sensor data, the first shot, and finally, Ethan's plea. He showed how one moment of panic had nearly erased a chance for something new. Elder Marath listened without blinking. When it ended, she turned to Vexlor. "You acted with Jartel," she said in Krellian. "You tied your honor to a stranger's life." Vexlor bowed his head. "I did." She then looked at Briggs. "Your people fired before listening. But you stopped. You came to speak, not conquer." "That is rare," Briggs nodded. "We want to learn." What followed was not a treaty of war, but a covenant of care. They agreed on clear rules. Any human vessel in distress would broadcast a new signal, a mix of sound and light the Krellians could recognize as a call for help, not a threat. Any Krellian ship finding a human would send a simple code: life found, safe, awaiting word. No more guessing. No more fear. They also agreed to share basic medical knowledge. Human antibiotics worked differently on Krellian biology, but some plant-based compounds from Earth showed promise in healing their kind. In return, Krellian energy shielding could protect human colonies from solar flares. It wasn't trade. It was sharing. Ethan spoke last. He didn't talk about politics or fleets. He talked about water in a cold pod, about a three-fingered hand offering warmth, about waking up not to chains but to care. "I was alone," he said, voice quiet but clear. "They saw me. They didn't have to. But they did. That's not an enemy. That's a friend." Elder Marath rose slowly. She walked to Ethan and placed her palm flat against his chest over his heart. It was the highest Krellian gesture of acceptance, a bond offered freely, not earned by blood or battle, but by truth. Then she turned to Briggs. "We will sign," she said. The Accord of Helios Drift was written that day, short, simple, human and Krellian words side by side. No fine print, no hidden clauses, just a promise. If you find one of ours lost, help them. We will do the same for you. As the leaders signed, Ethan stepped outside again. Lisa and Marcus joined him. So did Vexlor. They watched as a human supply ship and a Krellian scout vessel moved toward each other, not to fight but to exchange data crystals. A small thing, but huge. Back on Earth, people watched the broadcast in silence. No cheering, no flags waved, just quiet relief. Parents held their children. Soldiers removed their uniforms for the first time in weeks. In schools, teachers paused lessons to explain what had almost been lost and what had been saved. Months later, the first joint mission launched. A human Krellian science team studied a dying star near the Andromeda Fringe, the very place Ethan had been found. They named the research outpost Coal Station, not after a hero, but after a moment when one life mattered enough to stop a war. Ethan never returned to surveying. He became Earth's first official envoy to the Krellian conclave. He lived half his time on their homeworld, learning their songs, their stories, their quiet ways. He taught them about Earth, about oceans, about laughter, about forgiveness. Vexlor was promoted not for battle, but for wisdom. He often visited Earth, walking through parks in Houston, watching children play. He never understood why humans cried when happy, but he learned to recognize the look. Years passed. The Third Fleet was retooled for rescue, not war. Krellian ships began appearing near human colonies, not as threats but as neighbors. When a solar storm knocked out Mars' colony's power, it was a Krellian vessel that arrived first with backup generators and medics. No one remembered the names of the ships that fired the first shots. But everyone knew the name of the man who said, "Stop." Ethan stood once more on an observation deck, older now, hair streaked with gray. Beside him stood his niece, his sister's daughter, visiting from Earth. She pointed to the stars. "Are they out there?" she asked. He smiled. "Yes, and their friends." In the distance, a human cruiser and a Krellian frigate flew in perfect formation. Lights blinking in rhythm, a new language built not on fear, but on the simple truth that one life is worth saving and worth fighting for, but never worth losing the chance to understand.